Listen to this podcast now on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Why is the middle class shrinking? Why are people facing an affordability crisis while marginalized individuals called informals grow in numbers? Join me as I travel the world, speaking with people living in invisibility, the leaders working to solve it, and uncovering the hard truths shaping our economy and daily reality.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi!
Okay, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Joining me now is Mike Howell. He has been a leading voice in government accountability projects, particularly as president of the Oversight Project. He's been a leading proponent of this concept of a weaponization fund to assist those who were denied due process, those who were abused, weaponized, the targets of prosecutorial misconduct, government overreach, and the other efforts to destroy President Donald Trump and, candidly, everybody who supported him. And it appears that the background here is that the president had a pending suit with the IRS because they leaked his tax returns during the 2016 campaign. Every American is entitled to the confidentiality of their tax records, but thousands of Trump's personal and company tax records, as well as those of his children, were leaked by the IRS. It's a suit he would have won. He could have won. I think he sued for $10 billion. I think he settled for a couple billion with the understanding that the money would go into a fund that would help those who've been the targets of victimization, set up a scheme by which it would be administered. A federal judge seems to have stepped in to stop this particular plan, which I think certainly had a great purpose. Joining us now, Mike Howell. Tell me what's up.
Basically, the latest is a federal judge stepped in last week after 35 non-party judges sent a letter, retired judges, saying, hey, we don't like this thing, please stop it. Very unusual, very unheard of, actually. The judge agreed and then forced, the Trump team to respond and gave them a deadline of a couple weeks. And so that's one kind of lane this is moving down. The real lane that I think people need to be focused on is the Senate Republicans. They're the ones who are most opposed to this fund.
Yes.
They are threatening to defund ICE and CBP unless President Trump abandons his plans for it. So in other words, they would reopen the border and let ICE just go unfunded unless Trump kills this thing and does not compensate those who were harmed. It's an ultimate betrayal by the Rhino establishment. Majority Leader Thune is a chief architect of this posture. And it's terrible news, and it looks like the DOJ today, although ambiguous, said they're going to abide by this court's ruling, which is really non-news, but left unsaid was whether they're going to continue to fight it in court. And so that's what we're pushing for. Fight, don't give up. These people who were so viciously harmed need to be compensated.
It just seems to me, however, that there may have been a technical problem here, which is I think if Trump had settled the suit for X dollars, then put those dollars into a fund to compensate those who had been unfairly treated, set up an independent mechanism to administer the fund, I think there would be no viable lawsuit against that. It's his money, he can spend it the way he wants to. Had it been in that way from the beginning, the Senate nor the judiciary would have been in the way to block this. So I hate to say this as strongly as I think the fund was a good idea. And people kept asking me, well, what about you, Roger? They showed up at your house at 6 o'clock in the morning with 29 heavily armed FBI agents. They perp-walked your wife outside in her pajamas at 6 o'clock in the morning for CNN cameras. Would you be entitled to something? I actually made no decision about, had this come to pass, had there been such a fund, whether I would have filed. In all honesty, the people who were mistreated in January 6th, who were denied due process and were held in under circumstances that would be unacceptable under the Geneva Convention, which we treat terrorists worse than we're treating American citizens, based on many, many credible reports. To me, that is those people should be taken care of first. Those are the people I would like to see take care of first. I have no idea what people like Paul Manafort might do. General Flynn, of course, has already won a financial challenge. He's gotten $1 million payment. Now, the $1 million was Pyrrhic, but it was important because it proved that a court of law ruled that they basically set Mike Flynn up. I mean, 2 FBI agents went there to entrap him, even those after the fact said they didn't think he lied about anything. They were overruled by Andrew McCabe, the FBI agent, who's not even in the line of succession at the Justice Department. So it's a very strange thing, wouldn't you say, Mike?
Oh, it's very, very strange. I mean, these people, and I agree with you, the January 6th victims deserve to be absolutely at the front of the line. And if I'm named to lead this fund and the fund survives, these people will be paid in a matter of months. I mean, the speed at which you can operate in this independent fund would really, shock some people.
I guess here is the question. And that is, I'm not a lawyer, but basically, since this settlement has failed to serve its purpose, is there a way for Trump to revisit the case and litigate it? Because if he litigates it, he'll win. That was the whole point of settling.
I think your initial point is correct, that there could have been a cleaner way to do this. The political problem that I think President Trump was greeted with is he didn't want the money to hit his pockets at all, right? You can imagine what they would say, and then they'd come after him, once again for this if he were to take the payment.
He could have combated that by announcing the foundation and publishing the transfer of money from one bank to another with proper redactions, I suspect. Well, it is a great tragedy because you and I both know people whose lives have been shattered. We know people, sadly, who committed suicide. We know families of people, two women who were shot in cold blood, one of them bludgeoned to death, the other one shot in cold blood. The only people to die on January 6th. Both died at the hands of overzealous, shall we say, Capitol Hill police. And rather than be charged, those officers have been given medals and commendations, which is an absolute outrage. To be beaten to death with a steel pipe, essentially, by a female officer and then have the coroner say, "Oh, she died of a drug overdose." Please, I speak of one of those who lost their lives.
The harm is real and it's profound, and it's not just January 6th. Of course, that was the biggest example of it, but people had the full force of weaponization thrown at them for participating in all different activities, whether it was Christian protesters outside abortion clinics or parents at school boards. And to hear the Republican Senate and the rhinos refer to this thing as a slush fund is just obscene, because not just a year or so ago they would campaign with these people, they would issue statements in support of them, and now when there's a chance to help them, they're rug pulling on them and they're re-victimizing them all over again. And you know what is actually a slush fund? How about the Ukraine funding? How about the Farm Bill? How about virtually all the money they handed out to states like, Minnesota, which just turned around and gave it to Somali warlords? The Senate operates off of actual slush funds. And here, when there's actually a chance to help real Americans, they thumb their nose at them and poke them in the eye and throw them under the bus. And it's absolutely unacceptable. And to make matters worse, they threaten to open the border once again to return to the Biden years if they didn't get their way. And I don't think voters are going to forget that. At some point, the Senate needs to give people that support President Trump a reason to show up and vote for them. And here, they're just, sticking them right in the eye.
And I absolutely could not agree more. This is, unfortunately, again, I think the goal was a worthy one. But the president, I think, has to examine whether this can be revisited legally. He needs to continue to press the case. I think that's important. Generally speaking, I'm encouraged that Assistant Attorney General Todd Blanche now talking openly about investigating the 2020 election, looking at the safety and security, integrity of the electronic voting machines, presumably also has a seat at the table in looking at the material from the Fulton County warehouse, particularly the 300,000 ballots that were counted, but Mike, they were never folded. So if they were never folded, how was it they arrived in the mail? There you go. Not to mention the admission of members of the Fulton County Board that as many as 35,000 voters matched signatures or matching serial numbers. But hey, what's 35,000 votes in one state in which you only lost by 8,000?
You're asking the right questions, and I'm certainly glad that acting AG Blanche seems to be asking them to, and then also backing them up with action. I think he deserves tremendous applause for defending this fund to date. I hope he continues to. He went into the lion's den and got ripped a new one by Republican senators who obviously hate the concept of this so much. because deep down they hate the MAGA movement, and so many of the victims of weaponization are part of the MAGA movement. That's why my candidacy, I've been saying I will make MAGA millionaires, and because these people deserve it.
Well, I will say this: the acting attorney general has also been very out front on the whole Russian collusion question, which, as you now know, because it's a seditious conspiracy, sits in front of a South Florida a grand jury and set of prosecutors. Todd Blanche has made changes in that team. He's brought in Joe DiGenova, a veteran crime fighter, former head of the U.S. Attorney, I believe, for Manhattan, and also high up in the Justice Department to prosecute that case. And they get a jurisdiction that's not Washington, D.C., because they accurately make a case that this is a continuing conspiracy. It begins in the Oval Office with Barack Obama himself running the meeting. Joe Biden was there, helpfully suggesting that General Flynn be charged under the Logan Act. Susan Rice was there. She was saying, let me write a memo when this is over, saying the exact opposite of what we're really doing. It's called a CYA memo, Mike. And you had John Brennan, who was probably giggling a lot because he was the major domo of this particular disaster. He's the guy who knew that the so-called Steele dossier was a fraud, paid for by Hillary Clinton. It was a fabrication, yet he carefully slid it in, not to the actual intelligence briefing, but into the footnotes of the briefing, so he could then use it as a legal rationale to begin spying on everybody and his brother. So these people are extraordinarily busted, and the question is, will they be prosecuted? The case against them is not a weak case. They knew precisely what they're doing. They knew there was no intelligence breach at the department. They knew that there was no Russian hack of the Democrat National Committee. They have to give proof, any evidence whatsoever to prove that. And in fact, the empirical evidence proves the exact opposite. If you examine the speed time of the servers during which the material was purloined, that time is consistent with it being loaded to a hard disk and taken out the back door by someone. I think we can speculate about that. But their whole narrative has fallen apart, yet they still try to stick to it. It's one thing about liberals. They'll make an outrageous claim, you disprove it, they'll wait a couple weeks, and then they'll recycle it and make the same claim again as if you never addressed it. Did you ever notice that?
Oh, yeah, it's how you make the big lie. They're the big liars, and so you just repeat the lie over and over again until it reaches a stage of near religious dogma for them, that Trump is somehow a Russian stooge. And that's how they try to tear this country apart. I mean, they tricked a lot of people and still have many who have adopted that trick as an article of faith, and they did tremendous damage along the way.
Yeah, when we come back, one of the things I want to talk to you about is the auto pen, because I'm, as a non-lawyer, I'm still convinced that the pardons that were signed by Joe Biden, many of them, if not all of them, utilizing the auto pen, are not should not be legally binding because he didn't even know about them. He didn't authorize them, other than in the most general way, as he was. As they were putting on his diapers and giving him his nightly medication, he said that he wanted that taken care of.
You're absolutely right, and we got a big court case winding through right now where Joe Biden's trying to hide more evidence that would shed some light onto when the auto pen, really came into use. I think his, decline was a lot earlier than people are ready to admit.
But he's already kind of blurted out to the New York Times the truth is, which he told his guys, okay, what, like murderers? Okay, we could do some murderers. I mean, it was kind of like that, as opposed to examining each case to determine whether clemency was merited. This claim by Jill Biden last night that when he melted down on TV, her claim that she had never seen him act before that, like that, nor would she ever see him act that way again. That sounds to me like a bald-faced lie. This guy was non-compos mentis. He proved it every single day, falling down, could not be able to find the audience, shaking hands with people who didn't exist, saying that he was in a different place than he was, trying to introduce somebody for which he just gave an obituary. Do you remember some of those hits? I mean, it was like a Benny Hill operation watching him campaign across the country.
Right. Well, he didn't even campaign across the country too much. They hit him in the basement. But Jill Biden, lest us forget, she's a medical doctor, right? If we're to believe that. And so I find it hard to believe she missed all the signs that everyone else in the country was so well aware of. And I think the auto pen really was running the White House in the very earliest of days. I mean, in our investigation, we've uncovered, instances in which at the beginning of the administration, Joe was in the White House. Per the calendar, the auto pen was still signing things. And so they started hiding it, in full force during the campaign. And then when they went into the White House, they knew they would have a different type of administration, an auto pen administration. And it calls into question the, serious legal question. I think it's honestly beyond question, the legal validity of so many actions, including, the commutations for violent criminals that unfortunately the Department of Justice is still treating as valid and releasing individuals.
Yeah, people who never expressed remorse and never applied for such clemency. Quite interesting, isn't it?